All right, so today we're diving deep into a world that most people only see in movies. Uh, Teenage hackers, the CIA, government secrets, the whole nine yards.
It's a story that really captures how much the digital age has kind of leveled the playing field in a way.
Exactly. And it all revolves around these two guys, Default and Kraka. We're sticking with their aliases, obviously, but their story is about as real as it gets. So Default, he's based here in the US, starts dabbling and hacking young, typical teenager, messing with video game code, that sort of thing. But he eventually finds his way into this whole other world, anonymous.
Yeah, Anonymous, for those who don't know, think of them as this kind of loose-knit collective of hacktivists, I guess you could say, sort of like the internet's own Robin Hoods.
Right, taking on governments, corporations, anyone they see is abusing their power. And Default's early days with Anonymous and this other group, AnonSec, they really highlight this weird ethical line these guys walk. I mean, he was involved in some pretty wild stuff. Like, remember that time he wiped out millions of dollars in student debt?
Oh yeah, the Canadian University. He managed to delete something like $9.4 million of student debt. Just like that.
It's like he took student loan forgiveness into his own hands, which on some level you can almost see the appeal, right? People
Right.
buried in debt. But then again, he's also interfering with systems he has no right to access. It's tricky.
It is. And what's fascinating is how he pulled it off. It wasn't about brute forcing his way in. He exploited a vulnerability in their database, basically tricked it into thinking the debt didn't exist.
So clever, but also kind of scary, right? If you think about it.
Absolutely. And it speaks to Default's evolving sense of, I guess you could say, a moral compass.
Hmm.
This combination of technical skill and a desire to right what he saw as wrongs, which would really come into play later.
And it wasn't just financial institutions. He was also part of this campaign against these, well, they were being called dog brothels in Denmark. Horrific stuff.
Yeah, a really disturbing case of animal cruelty.
But Default and Anonsec, they basically used a mix of website defacement, social media pressure, the whole works, to force the Danish government to actually do something about it.
Which is an interesting point about how these groups operate, right? They
Yeah.
don't have to play by the traditional rules. They leverage the internet to bypass gatekeepers, go straight to the public, force a conversation that might not have happened otherwise.
It's like digital activism, for better or for worse.
Exactly. But while Default was kind of figuring out his own ethical code, as you put it, you have Kraka over in the UK, who was driven by, well, anger, really.
Oh, yeah, Kraka. He was furious about U.S. foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. Saw hacking as a way to fight back.
And it's that drive, that fascination with pushing boundaries that ultimately led him to cross paths with Default.
And it was a game changer, because Kraka had already made a name for himself by going after someone pretty high up, James Clapper.
The director of national intelligence, no less.
Wait, hold on. A teenager hacked the director of national intelligence.
That's the unsettling part. It wasn't some elaborate Hollywood hack. He used social engineering, publicly available information, to get into Clapper's personal email.
So he basically used the system against itself.
Exactly. And it just shows how, it's not always about fancy algorithms and supercomputers. Sometimes the weakest link is just human nature.
That's actually kind of terrifying when you think about it.
It is. And this was just the beginning. Kraka would go on to form this group, Crackers with Attitude, CWA, with the goal of exposing what they saw as, well, government hypocrisy. And this was right after Edward Snowden blew the lid off the NSA surveillance programs, right?
Great, 2013, Snowden's leaks were huge.
Huge. And it fueled this global distrust in governments, inspired a whole new generation of, well, let's call them digitally minded activists,
Yeah.
with Default and Kraka right at the forefront. And seeing what Kraka did with Clapper, that was a turning point for Default.
He saw a kindred spirit, someone pushing even further than he was.
Exactly. And that shared sense of purpose, it led them to their next target, one that would really put them on the map. John Brennan, the head of the
Yeah.
CIA. Talk about a guy who represented, like, everything they were against, CIA, government secrecy, the whole intelligence apparatus.
So where do they even begin? I mean, how do two teenagers even wrap their heads around targeting someone like the head of the CIA?
Well, they started with what they knew, right?
Yeah.
Social engineering, like they did with Clapper. Only this time, they managed to get Brennan's personal cell phone number.
Hold on, seriously. The CIA director's personal cell phone number?
Yep. And they didn't exactly use it for, polite chit-chat.
What, like prank calls?
Prank calls, impersonating government officials. Think about it. The head of the CIA getting bombarded with this stuff, along with his family.
I bet that went over well.
It was unnerving, to say the least.
Yeah.
For Brennan and his family, they had to take some pretty drastic security measures. Actually went into hiding for a while.
Wow. I mean, can you imagine? Your whole sense of security just shattered like that.
Exactly. And the thing is, the prank calls, that was just the warm-up act. Kraka, he managed to get into Brennan's personal AOL account.
AOL. Seriously. That takes me back.
Right. But anyway, what he found in those emails, that's when things got really serious.
Like what? What could be in there that was so bad?
Brennan's security clearance application. We're talking 47 pages. His entire life story, basically. Personal contacts, financial records, everything.
The kind of stuff that's supposed to be, like, locked in a vault somewhere, right?
Exactly. And it wasn't just sitting there. Kraka got access to everything.
And I'm guessing they didn't just keep it to themselves.
Of course not. They leaked it. All of it. To WikiLeaks.
Oh, man, that's got to be, like, public enemy #1 for the intelligence community.
It was a huge scandal. I mean, sensitive government information, details about interrogation methods, even Brennan's personal emails just plastered all over the internet.
Talk about a PR nightmare. So at this point, they've embarrassed the director of national intelligence, completely blindsided the head of the CIA. What's next? Were they done?
Oh, no. They were just getting started.
Yeah.
CWA, they were on a roll. They set their sights on the FBI and the Department of Justice.
So it's like they're taking on the entire U.S. intelligence community at this point.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they got results. Hacked into accounts, leaked personal data of FBI and DOJ employees, thousands of them. Even got their hands on the Justice Department's prisoner database.
Seriously. So they had, like, access to information on thousands of inmates.
I did. It was a massive breach. But, it couldn't last forever. And the way it all came crashing down, it wasn't some big government operation that took them down. It was their own doing. And, well, a little bit of teenage arrogance.
What do you mean? What happened?
Kraka, he got it in his head that the U.S. government was going to extradite him, torture him, the whole 9 yards. So he started planning his escape to Russia.
He was going to pull a Snowden.
That was the idea. Join Snowden in exile. He was young, idealistic, maybe a little naive about how the real world works. But Default, he was different. He was careful, covered his tracks, used encryption, all of it. But even he made a mistake, one stupid mistake.
So what happened? What was the mistake?
He got drunk. Bragged to a friend about the whole thing.
Oh, no. You've got to be kidding.
Nope, true story. The friend, well, he got spooked. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he thought it was the right thing to do. Who knows? But he went to the authorities.
What a mess. So much for loyalty, right?
Yep, just goes to show you, even in the world of hacking, the biggest vulnerabilities often come down to, well, people.
So what happened? Did they, like, storm their houses in the middle of the night?
Pretty much. Simultaneous raids, computers seized, game over.
And what about Default and Kraka? What happened to them?
Well, Kraka got off relatively easy.
Easy.
Well, easier, I guess. He was a minor when all this went down, so he ended up with 2 years in juvenile detention.
2 years is still a long time.
Oh, absolutely. Default, though. He got hit with the full force of, the U.S. justice system. 5 years in federal prison, plus a hefty fine.
5 years? That seems pretty extreme. I mean, he didn't steal any money. He didn't hurt anyone directly.
That's the debate, isn't it? Where's the line between, digital disobedience and actual criminal activity? And how do we weigh things like national security against individual rights, especially in the digital world? Something we're all still grappling with.
Definitely. So what are they up to now?
Kraka's, from what I hear, he's trying to put it all behind him. Says he wants to work in cybersecurity.
Really? Talk about irony, huh?
A bit, yeah. But Default, he's still dealing with the fallout. 5 years is a long time. And coming back from that, the stigma of a felony, it's not easy. It reminds us that even when we're talking about technology, about the internet, the choices we make have real-world consequences.
It really makes you think. And none of this means the government is backing down on surveillance, right?
Not at all. In fact, just last year, the Biden administration, they renewed this controversial program, the ACT program. It basically lets them collect electronic communications globally. Pretty much anyone, anywhere.
So even after all this, after these kids expose these vulnerabilities, they double down on surveillance.
Seems like it. And it gets even more concerning when you consider that a U.S. court recently found the FBI misused that very same database thousands of times.
Seriously. Targeting who?
Everyone from, Black Lives Matter protesters to people who donated to certain political campaigns.
That's really unsettling.
It is. And it feels like, in a lot of ways, we're moving further away from transparency, further away from accountability. not closer.
So what do we do?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? We have to stay informed, we have to ask tough questions, and we have to demand better from our institutions. Because this technology, it's not going away.
Definitely not. Well, on that note, we'll leave you with this. If a couple of teenagers can expose the CIA and the FBI like that, what does that tell you about the security of your own data? Think about it.